Hello, my name is Mark, and I thank you so much for coming by today. If someone asked you to tell your story, where would you begin? Would it be a long story, or would it be a short story? Would it be filled with all kinds of wondrous details, or would you keep it simple to make your story super clear? We all want to tell a good story that engages others, promotes conversation and dialogue, and may even get a reaction. But how do we tell a good story with our artwork? It seems easy for a children's book artist or a graphic novel artist, but what if we simply want to paint a landscape picture or do a character study? Well, no matter what we like to do creatively, each piece we create should tell some kind of story. Whether it's to communicate a message, a theme, or an emotion, there are ways to approach a piece to effectively tell a story that others can relate to get that message across, or to simply generate a response. Now, before we begin, I should note that it's allergy season here in New England, and I'm one of those people that gets hit hard every year. So I apologize in advance for the roughness of my voice if you can't hear it already. Anyhow, in today's discussion, I wanted to share 10 ways to help tell a story with our artwork, whether it's a landscape painting, a piece made from modeling clay, or a character from a graphic novel. And probably the best place to start is with number 1, originality. One of my favorite stories when I was young was Star Wars. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen or heard of before. It wasn't until a few years later when I learned it was essentially a retelling of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Throughout history, stories have been retold over and over, each one with a unique twist. For example, the story of Romeo and Juliet has been retold countless times, including in the classic West Side Story. Retelling a story that's already been written is nothing new. The only important thing to remember is to be original in the approach. Like when Pixar released the movie Cars, most viewers had no idea they were watching a retelling of the film Doc Hollywood. So whether it's the Beatles covering Chuck Berry songs or Procol Harum doing A Whiter Shade of Pale, which is almost identical to Bach's Air for G-string, which is a classical piece, it's important to ensure whatever story we're telling, that we tell it in a voice that is uniquely our own, an original voice that owns the story and will protect it from comparison. Trying to come up with fresh, original work can be challenging, especially if we subscribe to the belief that everything's been done before. Having an original voice is always possible, but we simply have to know how to create from our own origins and combine personal experiences with something that may be familiar or in a retelling of something established. But it's wise to remember that audiences are very quick to recognize and compare originals versus something being retold, which brings us to number 2, identify your audience. Country musicians don't write music for rap fans, and abstract artists don't create work for landscape exhibitions. Knowing the audience we're creating for will not only make our audience happy, but may also attract a larger audience. As artists, we have the ability to cross over into multiple genres which can appeal to an even greater range of people. For example, imagine a story that's in the animal genre. Now bring that animal story into the science fiction genre. Then incorporate that story into the fine art genre as well. Does this animal science fiction fine art story sound familiar? Well, this is the story of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which has been a huge franchise for decades. But most people don't know that it's actually leveraged from an original story called The Three Musketeers. So, fans of action, heroes and villains, comedy, and swashbuckling adventure stories would surely be attracted to both stories, though one may have more appeal to an audience than the other. Identifying our audience can be very tricky. For me, I work in various styles, which draws audiences from different ranges. My cartoonish work is probably the most popular, while my commercial work is very conservative. When I aim for realism or abstract work, my work then appeals to an even broader range. But when I'm creating a piece, I have to know exactly which audience I need to appeal to. When I create a piece for the wrong audience, they'll let me know about it. Connecting with our audience, however big or small, through our visual storytelling is key to growing that base and providing us with direction for our future work. One of the things I've learned about my own work is to make it more relatable. And that's number 3, make it personal. One of the most common things I see with artists, especially online, is that their work tends to lack emotion. Even the most technically proficient artists often fail to reveal their personality, spirit, or heart in their work. For them, a painting of a leaf is just a painting of a leaf. For many artists, their work is just rinse and repeat, choosing static subject matter, random color choices, and hurrying to finish to post online or to meet a deadline. In making our art personal, it means taking the time to put the flavor of our personality into each phase of the creative process. From concepts that are relatable and timely, to subjects that share our emotional qualities and values, to colors and compositions that enhance the experience. If you've ever watched me draw characters, you may notice that I always draw the eyes last. More specifically, I draw the pupils last. Because while I'm developing a drawing or a painting, I'm getting to know the characters I'm creating. Their personality comes to life as I flesh out their appearance until I finally come to the last stage, drawing in the pupils. For me, the eyes bring my subject into existence. It gives them a sentient sensibility. Myself and the viewers can connect directly with them through their eyes, and the relationship then becomes personal. We can relate to even the most repelling characters. And this doesn't just apply to people or animals. This applies to trees, structures, or even clouds. Creating things with lines that are soft and comforting can have just as much impact as lines that are harsh and chaotic. I've found that in bringing an honest, sincere part of myself into my work, it allows me my personality to show even if it's not directly. And when I look at that piece later, I find that I enjoy the work I did more. Which leads to number 4, enjoy yourself. It's very simple. If we're struggling through a piece and not enjoying any of the process, it will be 100% evident in the final presentation of it. The hardest part is identifying that exact moment when we're not enjoying ourselves. More artists feel that twinge of discomfort and ignore the fact that they're not enjoying their creative experience for whatever reasons. The point is that when they feel that discomfort, they ignore it and continue to try and push through and produce, making their experience even less and less enjoyable. It's common sense that we're at our best when we're rested, relaxed, and have time to immerse in our work. And when we're in a good place, that enjoyment of our work radiates in the piece we're working on. I can't tell you how many times I've been tired, under pressure, or completely disinterested in a project to the point where it's reflected in my work. What I've learned to do is to preempt my enthusiasm for a project before deciding to take on the project. When I was young, I would grab any project that came my way just to build up experience. But so many times I felt regret in taking on a project that I thought was going to be great and turned out to be terrible. Recently, I turned down a lucrative assignment because the subject was not something I found interesting at all, and because the client had 10 people who would be reviewing my work. I've had projects in the past where multiple people reviewed my work, and it always turns out badly because, well, when you've got 10 cooks in the kitchen, each one has a very different opinion about how the soup should be cooked. And with this project I turned down, I preempted my enthusiasm based on my past experiences to forego the headaches and my lack of interest despite how much it paid. I was polite in declining the job and even recommended a friend of mine who took the job right away. But for me, I just knew I would not have enjoyed it, not one bit. And that takes us to number 5. It must be attainable. When creating a story, especially a visual story, it must be doable. It must be something within our wheelhouse, so to speak, or within our abilities. Have you ever tried to work on a project in a medium you're completely unfamiliar with? Have you ever tried to work on a piece that is far larger than a scale that you're used to? Have you ever worked on a piece that was just beyond your skill set? I have, and I can't tell you how many times. Working outside our comfort zone is one thing, but working outside our skill set is another. I worked for a company years ago, one of my first jobs, as a technical illustrator. My job was to do cutaway drawings for mechanical devices like paper shredders, computer components, and so on. The marketing team would get the spec sheets from the engineers, translate them, and then give me the direction. Most times these projects were simple, but there were a few projects that were just way outside of my skill range. It took me a long time to realize that I was wasting too much time trying to complete the project instead of just knowing it instinctively. Knowing what we can and cannot do, especially early on, will keep us from wasting time, wasting materials and resources, and especially wasting money. Recognizing what's attainable for us will also keep us from doubting our skills, deflating our confidence, and second-guessing our decisions. And that's why number 6 is so important. Keeping it simple. It's easy to derail a story by getting into complex situations, extraneous details, or conflicting ideas. When I was an art director, one of the most common things I would tell designers to do would be to keep it simple. Many novice designers were anxious to populate an ad with too many elements, too many photos, too many fonts, too many graphic elements, and too many colors. It always amazed me that when I would recommend they keep it simple and highlight what elements to remove and which ones to bring to focus, they would suddenly see the ad more clearly. An artist's job is to communicate through visual expression. But when that communication is confused by too many visual elements, the message or the story becomes garbled. The one thing we want with any piece of art we create is to communicate clearly, quickly, and simply. My favorite collection of designs are the icons you find at international airports. Because thousands of travelers are rushing through airports all over the world and in different languages, and it was important for these artists to create icons that everyone could understand quickly, from gate signs to restrooms to baggage claims. This is one of the most important things to remember when creating artwork and trying to tell a story. Keep it simple. Minimal lines, minimal palettes, minimal focal points, and so on. Keep it simple. And a great way to do this is number 7, a story in one take. One of the things I loved about television shows from the 1960s and 70s was how each scene was shot like a still photograph. Characters could move into a scene where they would strike a pose and hold it until the shot needed to change. Other times the camera would move into a group of characters and hold them into the shot. Each of these still shots could be viewed as a story in one take, a simple snapshot where the show could communicate a specific direction of the story or a mood of the characters. I used to love when the characters on Star Trek would beam down to a planet and the scene would open on them in their new environment and in a single shot show their immediate reactions and emotions. Those reactions were a whole story in just one take. As artists, we have it a little easier because we're not creating hundreds of shots to build a story, but it's our job to tell our story in a single take or in a single piece. Whether we're presenting a landscape painting, an abstract digital piece, or a vibrant character study, the piece should be able to tell a story on its own. The most appealing artwork through history has the ability to communicate a lengthy story in a single image. The Mona Lisa, the Statue of David, and even the digital NFT, Every Day's the First 5,000 Days. They all communicate a specific theme or idea in a single image. The Mona Lisa portrays pure innocence existing in a toxic, volcanic landscape. The Statue of David shows the fear in the eyes of a young man facing his ultimate fear. And Every Days shows an exhaustive collection of 5,000 pieces of an artist's work contained in a single image. The work we create should always have something to communicate through color, texture, words, or shape. It's that communication that draws the viewer in and urges them to discover the story we're trying to share. And that takes us to number 8, coherence and continuity. The words coherence or cohesiveness and continuity are mandatory in the fashion world. Coherence is when a piece looks like it belongs to a larger collection or a body of similar work created by the same hand. Continuity is the organic natural flow from one piece to another which relates them together. Now, when we think of a comic book or a graphic novel, This is when we can move from one panel to the next or one page to the next with no interruption of the story or plot. The same is true with a film, where each shot moves along in a fluid, uninterrupted progression to tell the story. For me, if I create several highly detailed ink drawings, but then present a simple colored pencil drawing that looks nothing like the others, it breaks the continuity and limits the coherence to the group of ink drawings, not the colored pencil drawing. For Inktober 2021, I challenged myself to draw 31 drawings of an original group of characters living in a unique universe. Each piece was related to the one before it and the one after it, ensuring a cohesive collection and a continuous storyline to keep the viewers engaged. I created a video of this collection, which you can find down in the links below. It's called Pushing Our Creative Development. Number 9. The devil is in the details. This is an old idiom that warns us that when we get caught up in the details of our work, the more opportunities arise for mistakes and problems to happen. Ironically, the phrase is interchangeable with another idiom, God is in the details, which suggests that by adding fine details to our work brings us to a higher plane of joy, happiness, and success. What I interpret from both of these phrases is that adding details will always help make a piece richer and more full by giving depth and definition to a piece to help tell a more believable story. But, in being wise to both of these phrases as well, I also heed the warning not to add too many details, thus cluttering the image and making it difficult to read, hence interrupting the story I'm trying to tell because the viewer just can't figure out what they're looking at. A friend of mine used to say that the artist R. Crumb used too many lines. What they meant was that R. Crumb's drawings are heavily drenched in detail, specifically his cross-hatching and inking style, which makes his drawings very heavy and dense to look at. Some authors become overly descriptive in the details of a scene. One author in particular whom I've read seemed to be getting endorsements by detailing each character with the brands of food they ate, the clothes they wore, and even the cars they drove. Here's something they might write. She finished drinking her glass of Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice and got dressed in her Nike workout gear and matching CrossFit Nike sneakers before starting her Platinum Edition Lexus RX Hybrid. Well, for me, highly specific details like this distract me from the story because I can't relate, and now I'm focused on orange juice and Nike workout gear. The storyteller took me out of my immersion with extraneous details and then refocused my attention on material items. This also goes for our artwork. If we start placing very highly detailed elements in a piece, we risk distracting our viewer from the main focus of the piece and interrupting the story we're trying to tell. Keeping it simple and adding a limited amount of detail will be the right balance for a piece and invite the viewer to accept it without questioning what they're seeing. And at that point, when we feel like we've incorporated the right amount of detail, it's important to also recognize number 10, done is good. This was the most commonly heard phrase when I was designing sets for musical theater. While we were working on the set pieces, the director would casually walk by and look the piece over. And by their eye, the director would ask, "Is it done?" I would reply, "Pretty much." And the director would then walk away shouting, "Then it's done, and done is good." Whenever we'd hear that phrase, we'd put that piece in the finished area and move on to the next piece on the set list. So whether building a Viking ship out of plywood, a covered wagon out of cardboard, or just painting a still life for fun, it's important to know when a piece is finished. One thing that I saw while teaching high school art was that students often didn't know when to stop working on a piece, to the point where they would overwork it and ruin the piece, and it caused a lot of frustration for them. I instructed them that when they felt their piece was near to 3/4 done, to call me over and we could review it together. This was exactly the same thing I told novice designers when I was an art director. Instead of spending excessive time overworking a piece, have someone come in and provide feedback. Even now, I often ask family members to give me their feedback on a piece, as there's times that I risk not realizing when it's finished. For me, it took a long time to be able to stop working on a project, leave it for a day or two, and come back to it with a fresh set of eyes to see what needs to be addressed. This is what I call done enough. That's the point I get to with a piece where I feel like it's finished, but know in my heart that I could keep working on it for another hour, 2, or 3. That's when I step away from the piece and give myself time to forget what the piece looks like and refocus on other things. Then, when I come back to the piece, I can bring those fresh set of eyes and look at it and see what needs to be addressed, added, or even removed. It's easy to rush a piece, but if we can consciously work as thoroughly at the end of a piece as we do at the start of a piece, we'd probably find that the story we're trying to tell communicates much more clearly and more effectively. Well, I hope this discussion was helpful and provided some information that you can use. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd enjoy reading it in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed, please do, and I'd love to bring you more content like this in the future. I hope you're staying healthy and challenging your creative spirit. Thank you again, and as always, God bless.